the challenge that young people are facing online and the attacks that they're facing are very, very important for us to address. I've got 4 small children, and not only are we going to kind of discuss the horrible, heinous abuses that take place online, but also the kind of more benign attacks that take place. We don't really let our kids on their phones that much. In fact, they don't really have phones. They have our old phones that aren't connected to anything, but they can play games. And we, every once in a while, let them play. And what I've noticed are these ads that are popping up in the midst of these games that my 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 8-year-old are playing that I have no control over. I can't regulate. I can't stop the ads that they're seeing. They're just targeted this way. And I'm concerned because these industries have a financial incentive to pull these kids in to become users of their products, some good, some bad. But we as parents aren't guiding that process for our kids. And I think it's time for us parents to take control and take back what our children are being exposed to. We don't let our children eat junk food on a regular basis. We control their diets. We also need to be able to control the diets of what they're consuming online. It is our God-given role and responsibility as parents to help our children navigate the minefields online. And I want to use an example I think is so relevant to this. I saw it at a Promise Keepers rally years ago. They had this big stage and they set live bear traps up all over the stage. These were real live bear traps that you step on and probably take a man's foot off. And they put them all over the stage, and then they blindfolded a teenager on one end and said, walk through the bear traps. Well, that's a scary proposition. But then they had his dad walk out there and guide him through that process. And I think that's what we're going to be talking about a little bit tonight, is what is our role to help guide children through an online existence and avoiding those bear traps that can seriously harm them. So I am so very grateful to have Donna Rice Hughes here. Donna Rice Hughes is the president and CEO of Enough is Enough, which is an internationally known internet safety organization. She's an internationally known internet safety expert, an author, speaker, and film producer since 1994. She has been a pioneer leader on the front lines of the U.S. effort to make internet safer for children and families by implementing a 3-pronged strategy of the public, the technology industry, and the legal community sharing the responsibility to protect children online. This strategy has been adopted by industry and governments worldwide. Under her leadership, Enough is Enough has created the Internet Safety 101 program with the U.S. Department of Justice. She is the executive producer and host of the Internet Safety 101 DVD series, which was reformatted to the Internet Safety 101 television series for PBS and earned an Emmy Award and an Emmy nomination for Donna as the program's host. She developed and spearheaded the National Safe Wi-Fi campaign. This is just great. Calling on corporate America to filter pornography and child pornography on public Wi-Fi. As a result, both McDonald's and Starbucks are now filtering Wi-Fi on all their company-owned stores in America. Hughes also spearheaded Enough is Enough's bipartisan Children's Internet Safety Presidential Pledge, which was signed by candidate Trump and supported by Hillary Clinton. She's also been a part of the Governor's Pledge and the Attorney General's Pledge, which she's rolling out nationally right now in 2020. She has given thousands of media interviews on the topic, testified numerous times before Congress, and most recently won the 2013 Women in Technology Award for Social Impact and the 2014 Professional Women in Advocacy Excellence in Advocacy Award for Veteran Practitioner. She also received a Senate appointment to serve on the Child Online Protection Act Commission. Friends, we've got one of the best here with us tonight, a real expert helping guide us and inform us. Friends, please welcome Donna Rice Hughes.
Thank you. Thank you all. I am trying to get my little speaker thing set up here, and I think I broke it, Walter. Trying to get it in these pants. All right. So hi, everybody. Hey, y'all, as we say in the South. I'm from South Carolina, but I've lived all over the place, but it's really good to be here. And I see we've got some students. Let me see the students that are in the audience. Okay, great. The host, I have to just tell a little story on Amy today. I said, so what's the breakdown of the audience? You know, between students, faculty, whatever. She said, well, there's going to be some students, but most everybody's going to be a little older, like 60. And I went, okay, I just turned 62, so we're all in the same ballpark. But anyway, it's good to be here and be back in Denver and on such a warm day. And I just want to, before I start, I want to thank or introduce my colleague and somebody I look up to in this work, and she happens to be a friend and on our board of directors, and her name is Dr. Jill Manning. Jill, would you stand up? And her daughter, Kate, is outside of Denver, and Jill is a PhD, and she specializes in treating people who struggle with some of the issues that we're going to be talking about. So I wanted you to meet her, and then we have some other guests here tonight from SaferNet, and they sat up there, and we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Okay, so we're talking about draining the cyberswamp. So I'm going to do my best to speak to students as well as the 60 and over crowd, all right? And we're going to try to cover it all. How do we protect our kids and our grandkids? And for young people, how do we protect ourselves? I mean, this is a tough world to navigate, right? And so you all, okay, I'm going here. This is the 60 crowd. This is the student crowd. You're going to hear some things that the students already know. All right, so when you don't cringe too much, because they're going to know and understand a lot of stuff that I'm going to be talking to you about that you may not know yet. All right, and I apologize in advance that some of this is difficult to hear, but this is the reality of the digital world. All right, so this is what I call this the perfect storm for the sexual exploitation of children. All right, we've got a number of scenarios, and I'm just going to walk you through them if you want to look on the screen. First of all, we have kids online, right? The majority of kids are going online at a very early age, some as young as 2 and 3 and 4 years old. Why? Not because they can navigate the internet, but because what do their parents give them to play with? The smartphone, the laptop, etc., which will often be connected to a game or YouTube or something like that. And the kids who are online, once they start to use the internet themselves, have 24/7 access. This is new with what we call Web 2.0 and Web 3.0, when the internet became much more interactive. And we moved from the computer to the laptop, to the gaming device, to the smartphone, which is connected to the internet, and kids have these in their back pockets and in their knapsacks. So it's 24/7 access. We also have a lot of dangerous things happening out there, I'll just put it that way. Over on this far right side of the screen, I've listed first internet pornography, and I'm going to spend a lot of my time talking about that because I believe it is one of the biggest threats to our young people in the world today. I'm hearing this all over the world. A well-known evangelist you might know of, Josh McDowell, who is on my advisory board, tells me that everywhere he travels in the world, he hears from pastors and youth leaders and people that are people of faith that the number one problem that they're seeing inside the church is, guess what? You can say it, pornography, all right? The other issue that we're going to talk about is child sex abuse images. You may have heard child pornography. It's the same thing. I'll probably just say child pornography to shorten that, but really what child pornography is the video or a picture of the sex abuse of a child. All right. Then you have sexual predators. All right. These can be traffickers, anyone who is using this technology to prey on others. And in this case, we're going to be talking about mostly children. All right. And then cyberbullying. I'm not going to spend too much time there. Then we do have laws in law enforcement, which I'm going to cover in just a little bit, but a lot of the laws that we have are either not being aggressively enforced, or there's just so much crime that law enforcement can't keep up with what's going on, or in some instances we just have complete loopholes that haven't been fixed yet. Because the criminal element is always and has always been way ahead of law enforcement and the technology. In fact, they were the early adopters of the internet technology. And then we have those who are supposed to be the first line of defense to protect children, who are parents and grandparents, and they are oftentimes ill-equipped, uninformed, overwhelmed, and the list goes on and on. So you can see this perfect storm. Now, before I begin getting kind of deeper into this, I just want to set the stage that we're going to be talking about the manifestation of all of this in the physical world. But I think it's important that we understand that this is a spiritual war, right? And it really is. So as we go through this, I just want to remind us of an important verse, and that is to bring every thought captive to the obedience of Christ. So as we cover some of this difficult material, if anything kind of gets jogged up in you or triggers anything, just remember, say, hey, Lord, I'm just bringing this to you, and help me to understand what you want me to see and hear, and to apply to my life, but, that there would be no harm done. All right, so here we go. I think I'm doing this right. So, pornography. Pornography is really nothing new. It stems from the old Greek word porneia. Now, porneia goes all the way back to the Old Testament, and it means sexual immorality. All right? And so what would pornography be? The graphic presentation of any kind of sexual immorality, right? So I'm going to cover 3 types of pornography. You've heard the saying, I'll know it when I see it, right? A lot of people don't really understand that not all of this sexual imagery that is out there is not protected by the First Amendment. Did you know that? All right, so you're going to get a Pornography 101 lesson. So students, when you go to class tomorrow, you can say, hey, I learned Pornography 101, and they're going to go, who did you hear last night? So you can blame it on me. So the first type of content is what most of us think of when we think of pornography. And it's in the first picture here. It's called harmful to minors content or indecency. This is the soft core type of material that is protected speech for people over 18, consenting adults, but not for those under 18 or 17, depending on the state. Now, what would that be? That would be the Playboy Penthouse type of content, right? In the 1990s, by the way, I've been involved in this issue since 1994, since right before the internet was taking off. We discovered hardcore pornography, not just softcore, but the hardcore stuff I'm going to cover in just a minute, and child pornography surfacing on the pre-internet. This was before email, this was before search engines, this was as the World Wide Web was being developed. And in fact, I got a chance to go to MIT and talk to the guys who were developing code to develop the web. And we saw this starting to happen, and we went, oh my goodness, we've got a problem here. So we went to Congress and launched the first piece of legislation to try to extend the laws that protect children from all types of content harmful to minors and hardcore and child pornography and everything else to this new medium called the internet. Because it was a brand new medium and the laws didn't apply, right? And so that was the children's, it's called the CDA, and it passed overwhelmingly by the Senate, and also we got it passed by the House. It was bipartisan. We also extended some other laws, made it a crime for sexual predators to use the internet to approach kids, to have sexual contact with them, and all of this. Now, this sounds like, well, that would just be a no-brainer, right? But it wasn't. We had to actually get these laws on the books. But what happened was the Supreme Court actually challenged, the ACLU challenged the harmful to minors part of that law, and it was enjoined, and the Supreme Court struck it down. So what does that mean? That means that there was actually no barrier to prevent kids from getting that type of content. So a 12-year-old child cannot go get a Playboy or a Penthouse magazine or an X-rated video, right? Because of what? The harmful to minors or the indecency laws, but on the internet they can get all of that. Because we didn't get that law did not withstand a Supreme Court challenge. Congress went back again. We did another law, the COPA. I was also very involved in that. That went back and forth between the Supreme Court and the lower court, and it was never upheld. So we do not have any kind of law that protects kids from that type of content. But what's even worse is that there is another type of content which is the new normal on the internet, and it is called obscenity under the law, right? That's what the name of the law is, and it's obscenity. This type of content is hardcore, graphic. It can be any type of sex act being depicted. It can also be more deviant and extreme types of content like bestiality, excretory pornography, rape, violence, that type of content. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you think that's protected speech under the First Amendment? Okay, raise your hand if you think that that's protected speech. Okay, we've got one. Anybody? Okay, raise your hand if you don't think it's protected speech. Okay, you're right. It's not protected speech. However, that content is the majority of the content that is on the internet. And who has access to it? Everybody. Everybody's got access to it. It's not even protected for adults. Okay, so why do you think it's out there? It's not legal. So why would it be there? Money. Who said enforcement? Enforcement. Yeah. The federal obscenity laws in the United States, and the United States is one of the top producers of this content worldwide, have not been aggressively enforced since the advent of the internet. Okay? Now, except I will say for a brief time under Attorney General Ashcroft, under Bush II, I think it was, and then not at all in the next administration. And so here we are. The Pandora's box was open and it's never been put back in. So kids have access to all of this kind of content. The third type of content is called child pornography or child sex abuse images, and I just described that to you. This is also not protected speech. And so the majority of law enforcement dollars have been and continue to go to the enforcement of the child pornography laws and also the sexual predation laws and the sex trafficking laws. Does that make sense? So are you getting an idea of the landscape and why we've got a real problem? All right. Any questions so far? I'm going to take a little sip of water. Questions? No? Okay. So, this past year, the New York Times did 2 stunning investigative pieces. And what they found was that the tech companies had reported over 45 million new online images and videos of children, child sex abuse images. That's double from the year before. I have been in the past 6 months to probably 6 Department of Justice summits or symposiums put on by Bill Barr, and to several meetings at the White House, just on this issue alone. Now, the other thing that the New York Times discovered is that the tech companies are underreporting this. So we really don't know how bad this is. So what law enforcement has told us is that they're at a breaking point, that they cannot even enforce their way out of this. Now, all this, I'm not trying to create this as a doomsday or anything, but I want you to understand why the role of parents and grandparents in technology and corporate responsibility is so important, okay? So that's child pornography. Now we're gonna pop back over here to internet pornography. Remember what I said. What's the most common type of content that's out there? It's obscenity. It's not protected speech, but it's not been enforced. So, I mean, what's the speed limit here in Denver? Okay, some say 65, so, all right. But what if everybody was going 125 miles an hour for the past 10 years? Even though the speed limit was 65. How many of you would actually think that the speed limit was 65 if everybody was going way over the speed limit? You may not even know that there was such a thing, right? So that's where we are right now. So here's what's going on in this internet porn world. Someone called it, and I think this was one of the best analysis I've ever heard, the largest unregulated social experiment in history, which is what we have right now. Now I'm going to just pop back to the pornography, different types of pornography real quick. In the media world, all of the content that's out there is regulated by the laws that I just shared with you. Okay? In print, in broadcast, in video, in film. The internet is anything goes. And where are kids spending most of their time? On the internet. I mean, how many of them are even watching TV that much? A lot of them are streaming. I know, I've got 3 grandkids. I just left all of them the other night in California. And they have everything coming through their TV and being streamed through their technology. So here's just a little breakdown of what the kind of content that is out there. I just mentioned this one particular scenario. There were some scenes analyzed in the pornography and found that about 88% of the scenes analyzed depicted some type of physical aggression against a woman. Here's what I find particularly disturbing. Our kids are getting a steady diet of content like this. They're being exposed at younger and younger ages. As you can see, kids under 10 years old make up 22% of online porn use of minor kids. So kids under 17 or 18 years old, 22% of them are under 10 that are looking at this kind of content. Okay? What kind of sites are they looking at? Extreme, brutal, gangbang. I just put some of the descriptions: sleep assault, domestic discipline, and crying and pain. So this is what our kids are getting exposed to. This is the kind of content that boys who are growing up and starting to date your daughters have been exposed to in so many instances. And young girls are getting exposed to this kind of content as well. So it's not just a guy thing anymore, and not at all. Boys and girls are getting exposed to all of this. So Prevention Science magazine came out with this information that the average age of first perpetration of sexual violence is a child or youth aged 15 to 16 years old, and was associated with exposure to extreme or violent pornography. All right? So there are a number of states now, because of the peer-reviewed science that is there, that's available. Now, we've known this for a while anecdotally, but now the science, the medical science and the research has caught up to what we've seen experientially, all right, over the years, that this really is a public health issue. And so I think there are about 13 to 15 states that have either proposed or passed a state resolution to declare pornography a public health crisis, which is appropriate. Also, the Republican GOP platform has passed a similar resolution, and I'm hoping that the Democratic platform will do the same thing, because it's important we look at this. When did we start to see a shift in cigarettes smoking? Do you remember? What happened? The cigarette companies always knew that cigarettes were a nicotine delivery stick, right? But Surgeon General warnings, right? It was reframed as a public health issue, and that started to shift the dialogue and started to shift the way we looked at this, from a right to how is it impacting everyone, not just the individuals using it, but the culture and everyone at large. So here's what we know. Internet pornography fuels child sexual exploitation and abuse. Addiction is highly addictive, particularly in young people's minds. Have you heard that the prefrontal cortex is not fully developed until you're about 25, they say now, Jill? 25, 26 years old? Sorry, all you under 25, but you got a little ways to go. That's okay. All right? but it's not fully formed. And we know that with youth or with adults, that this content actually neurochemically alters the brain. So if you have struggled with a problem with pornography, or you know someone who has, you know that the images are not easily erased because they've been chemically embedded or imprinted in your neurochemical pathways. This is why it is such a hard addiction to break. All right, it's possible. We're going to talk about that. All right, but it's a hard one to break and it's been called by many the drug of the new millennium because it's used like any other drug to relieve anxiety, to get our mind off something. You know, it's obviously pleasurable and okay, I'm not going to get too much into that. But anyway, all right. Pornography also fuels violence against women, and here's one other thing that guys are now finding out about: pornography-induced erectile dysfunction. So there's a whole movement of young men online who have discovered this, and they have themselves started to promote the harsh reality that this is hurting their sex life. And so there's movements towards abstinence and that kind of thing to stop using it, and to pull back. So these are just some of the harms. Now, there was a Barna report a number of years ago, 2016, and I thought this was particularly interesting. They asked teens and young adults what they thought was immoral. And just look up here on the screen a minute. 88% said stealing. I agree. 56% said not recycling. 32% viewing pornography. It is considered very, very normal, a rite of passage. I just heard a story that a young child just said everybody's doing it at 10 and 11 years old, and this is what's happening out there. So it used to be we would talk to parents and grandparents about protecting your children, protecting their young eyes from ever seeing any of this. Now we've had to change that a little bit, going, even if you do everything you can to protect them, and you need to do everything you can to protect your children, they're probably going to come across this content at some point outside of the home. Another child's going to show them on a gaming device at school. I've heard stories of bus drivers having to stop kids looking at this stuff in the back of the bus, 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, because some kids got it on their smartphone. Okay, so now there's some really good resources that teach you as an adult how to talk to your kids about how to interpret what they see when they see it. That this is not God's design for sexuality. This is counterfeit. This is not healthy sexuality, and help them before they even see it so that they're prepared. All right. So we've had a little bit of a shift there. Now, how many of you have heard of Pornhub? Well, if you haven't, you're going to be hearing about it a lot more, because there's a big move right now to shut them down, to shut down this website. But the pornographers have started to aggregate this content. And Pornhub, it just happens to be one of the biggest hubs of aggregated pornography in the world. And you can just see what the numbers look like. Total visits in 2019, 42 billion. All right, it's worth more than $3 billion. This, people say, why is this all out there and everything? It's all about the money. This is big, big business. Pornhub has also been involved in what we call porn trafficking. A lot of the people depicted in this content are actually trafficked victims, women and children. I just put a couple of stories up here, and I'm not going to get too much into this because it's really horrible, but the first one was of a mother who discovered her missing daughter. There were 58 videos of her on Pornhub. And she had been missing for up to a year and was trafficked. January 4th, the most watched video with over 4 million views was of a trafficked girl who was brutally being tortured. And so that's again, that's what's out there in the culture, and you can just see the horrors of all of this for everybody. Okay, we're going to pop over to sex trafficking here real quick. Let's see where I am. Okay, sex trafficking is the issue du jour now, as it really should be. I mean, you're hearing about it more and more and more. But I want to talk a little bit more about the supply and demand side of this. Because of the content that is out on the internet that we just described, what we're finding is that porn users are demanding new and more violent and more depraved types of content, right? So there's a demand for that. I was just down at the southern border last week, and we were talking about the trafficking issue, and I've been at the White House talking about this issue. And sex trafficking is one of the big issues that we're dealing with at the border, dealing with the issues of smugglers bringing across women and children for sale, for sex, and drugs and arms, primarily. All right, and they're the same kinds of cartels and criminals that are selling all of this and bringing it across the border. But I've asked the question at the White House, and even Ivanka Trump, I said, why do you think they're coming here? Why are the smugglers bringing trafficked girls and victims here? There's a demand, right? There's a demand. Why is there a demand, do you think? Men are getting hooked on the kind of pornography that I've been sharing with you, whether it be child pornography or the obscene kind of content, and often will want to act out those desires and those fantasies on a real person. And hence, there's a demand. All right, so that's how the supply and demand works. So more and more women and children are being trafficked and prostituted. So this is not just happening across the border, it's happening all over our country. In just about every community, this is going on, right here in Denver. And so like I said before, U.S. is number 1 in obscene pornography, number 2 in hosting child pornography sites. So one of our big pushes is to try to get all these laws aggressively enforced. Just a little bit of background. Trafficking is the fastest growing organized crime in the United States. And the internet is the primary vehicle for women and children being sold and advertised and used. All right, so hence our involvement. Now I'm going to hop over to predators online. I promise we're going to get to solutions here real quick. So I'm going to just download all this real quick. So predators are online. We didn't used to talk about sex trafficking until, I don't know, 7-8 years ago. We mostly talked about sexual predators online. But a sex trafficker is a sexual predator, and they use the same methods as a child predator or a pedophile. All right? Just a couple of things. This is where the internet really shifted everything with respect to sexual predation and now trafficking. And that is, predators have easy access to who? Online. Kids, right? Remember that first scenario. They have easy access to kids, right? And kids are out there using the internet and being trusting and innocent, and they're interacting with these people. Because do you think a predator comes up and says, hi, I'm 45 years old and I'm a convicted sex offender and I want to have sex with you? No. They do what we call grooming. They will groom a child, become their friend, find whatever interests them, and get into their world and become a trusted voice in that child's life. That's the way that works. That's just kind of shorthand for grooming. All right? Another thing, they have easy access to what kind of content? Child pornography. Before the internet, you could hardly find child pornography. And sexual predators didn't get together and have, community meetings and called the pedophile club. But they're doing that all the time on the internet, all over the world. And so what happens when they get together? They share information about how to avoid law enforcement detection. They share information about how to abuse children. They actually abuse children online in real time with other predators watching, live stream. Okay, this is what is going on. So look, I love the internet. The internet is terrific, but it is neutral. It is being, remember back to the beginning, this is a spiritual battle. Can you see the enemy at work here? Okay. Well, I got a piece of hair in my mouth. Another thing that is happening is these predators, and I'm going to put everybody in this category, whether it's a trafficker or a pedophile, they get together and they validate with one another that what they are doing is okay. It is acceptable. So they virtually validate one another. There have been sexual predators, and some that I've talked to that are in jail now, that have told me, I don't think I would have ever acted out if I had not gotten involved in discussion groups with other predators and felt that actually that it was okay, the sexual appetite I had for children and what I wanted to do. So this is the perfect storm for predators online. So, parents, grandparents, remember one thing, because I don't know what new technology is going to come down the road in 10 years. But it's going to be really cool for all the good, beneficial reasons that it was invented. But always remember that it can be misused and exploited by the bad guys, right? So, important point, and I'm going to have you all say it out loud. Where predators prey where children play. Okay? Your turn. Predators prey where children play. So just remember that. When apps got developed, where do you think the predators are going? They're going to the apps. They're going to TikTok, Instagram, you name it, right? Social media, the same thing. When it was MySpace and Facebook, that's where they started to go. So that's always going to be the case because they want access to more and more kids. And as they have access to more and more kids, many of these predator clubs, if you will, actually, as to be a member of a club and to get all the child pornography in these that the other members have, they have to produce new child porn, which means they've got to abuse more children, upload those videos, upload those pictures, and put it out there. So that is the scenario. Okay, sextortion. Does anybody know what that means? I'm going to ask the young people up here. I know you know what that is, right? Come on. Give me a break from talking. Nobody knows? Sextortion? Have you not heard that term? Really? Okay. Scenario. Bobby and Sue are dating, and they have a sexual relationship, and they're 15 years old, right? Bobby breaks up with Sue. In the meantime, Sue has sent her new pictures of herself, right? What's that called, by the way? Sexting, all right? One of the biggest concerns of parents is sexting. Kids of very young ages are sexting these days. It's kind of considered a rite of passage in some instances. So it's the new normal, unfortunately, with young people. So what Bobby might do then is to get her back for something or to embarrass her, he may use that picture to get her to do something else. To say, if you don't do this, I'm going to share this picture online. Traffickers are doing this. Sexual predators are doing this too. They'll get a young person, a child, to send pictures of themselves, to do whatever, and then now it's in the hands of an evil person or a criminal. And then they can manipulate their victim by threatening, it's extortion, we call it sextortion, by threatening and getting them to do other things because what? They have got pictures or videos that person does not want out there. That's what's called sextortion. 42% of sextortion victims met their abuser online. Okay, we're going to go to social media, apps, and gaming. I could spend a whole 2 hours just on this, but I'm just going to kind of keep it quick. How many of your kids or grandkids are using online games? Okay, how many young people, how many of you guys are doing games? Okay, games aren't bad, by the way. Games are great. You know, we were playing some kind of football game the other day with my grandkids. I couldn't figure it out, but they were doing great, and my husband was having fun. But anyway, with online games, remember where predators prey, where kids play? With games, you've got all the senses going because kids actually have headphones oftentimes where they can talk to the people that they're playing games with. Oops, I gotta really go fast. Okay, they can talk to the people they're playing games with. They can hear them. They're actually playing with these people, and they can actually even disguise their voices, called voice masking technology. But a lot of the games have pornography embedded in them. Okay, they're advertising for some of the games, and then many of the games, I was just being told, Wendy, I think you told me, or somebody told me, maybe it was you, Jeff, that some of the ads that are popping up look like it's a new cool game, and it's just a reroute to a porn site. All right, but how do predators use this kind of content? Well, this was just something that just came out the last year, Children's Internet Usage Study. They found that these are kids in grades 4 through 8, that they were connecting with strangers, which is one of the big things we tell parents to talk to their kids about, not connecting with anybody they don't know in the real world, through all these different mechanisms. And what did they tell these strangers? 53% revealed their phone number. Just look at the data here. You don't have to look at me. 21% talked to a stranger over the phone. 15% tried to meet that stranger. Okay, so remember, where kids play, predators prey. All right. This is a big slide. I can't get into it too much, but there is a connection, a very strong connection between obscene pornography, child sex abuse images, and trafficking. One fuels the other. And I have said quite a few times, and continue to say this to the Department of Justice, I'm going to tell you where we are with all that in just a minute, that trying to stop sex trafficking and child sex abuse images without enforcing the pornography, the obscenity laws, is like trying to clean up water pollution without holding the industries dumping toxic waste into the water accountable. And that's exactly one of the reasons, in my opinion, we've got this mess, right? The law enforcement and our own government is not aggressively looking at this in a holistic way. All right, so just a few little points I don't think that I've shared. With child sex abuse images, the trends are younger. Bill Barr has just said, and at these conferences I said I've been to, summits and whatnot, the kids are so young, infants and toddlers, and so they are focusing more on the law enforcement of that type of child pornography because they do not have the resources to go after all the rest of it. Okay? We already talked about how pornography fuels the demand for trafficked victims. Barely legal is another thing I didn't get too much into, but there is the pornographers and the child pornographers just cross-market their content. So a lot of men who have started with adult porn, even softcore down to the more extreme pornography, oftentimes will cross over into child pornography because of what we call barely legal content, where girls who are actually 18 years old, legal, look younger, and whet the appetite of these men to have a sexual appetite for younger girls. So that's the way that works. Okay, now we're getting to prevention. What are we going to do about it, all right? Is there hope? Yes. I know. Anyway, okay, prevention. You heard Jeff say our focus is a shared responsibility. I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're doing specifically. There's so much going on now. When we started in 1994, there were like 3 groups, 3 nonprofits. Now there are hundreds. And hundreds in fighting child porn, hundreds fighting trafficking, hundreds fighting bullying. Why? Because it's such a big problem. We need all these groups. We need all of this going on. But our focus is in these 4 areas. The public, and that includes parents. I'm just going to focus there. Corporate America, doing their part, complying with the law, developing better technology and best practices. The legal community, there's a big issue right there. new laws and getting the laws we've got enforced, and then the faith community. Now, I believe that the answer, the foundation of all of this is the church, but I'm going to go with the parents because I changed my slides around. I thought it was on that slide. So, is that funny? Anyway, all right. So let's just start with parents. Parents are the first line of defense, right? To protect the innocence and the dignity of their children. We created the Internet Safety 101 program. We have 2 websites. Please go to our website, enough.org or internetsafety101.org. But we created a program to teach parents how to keep their kids safe from all these different dangers. I'm going to take some questions at the end about specifically what you can do. But our key message to parents and adults and grandparents is just a couple of real quickies. You have to have regular conversations with your kids about what they're doing online. If they're online every day, if they're using technology every day, you need to be talking to them every day. That's my best advice. You need to know who they're communicating with, teach them about good boundaries, help them understand the dangers, and if they're old enough to be on social media, which is 13 by the way, even though there's no age verification to keep under 13-year-olds off social media sites, right? A kid that's 7 can just go on Facebook and say that they're 13 or 14 and they get on. All right, so the other is to use the technology tools that are available. And we highly recommend filtering, monitoring technology on every single internet device that your kids are using. All of them. I had a mom call me a number of years ago and she goes, my 9-year-old or whatever is hooked on porn, so I took the computer away. And I said, okay, did you talk to them about the issues and everything else? They said, yeah. And I said, well, what kind of technology is he using now? Oh, Xbox. I'm like, oh, okay. So do you have filters turned on, or is it open access to where he can play and do anything, on Xbox? She goes, oh, I didn't know you could do that. I said, yeah, that is a computer. So you have got to treat the gaming devices, the smartphones, and everything else like it's a computer, because guess what? It is. It's just smaller. It's just for a different purpose. All right? So I'm going to take some questions on that in just a minute. What are we doing at Enough is Enough on corporate responsibility? We've done a lot over the years, but our newest campaign is the Safe Wi-Fi campaign. So we've always taught parents to use the safety rules and software tools on every internet-enabled device. But what happens if the parent has got all the technology locked down in the house and the child walks out of the house with their laptop, with their smartphone, and hops on any Wi-Fi anywhere? They can bypass those controls, typically, and have what? Anything. So we went to corporate America, starting with Starbucks and McDonald's, who were filtering child pornography and pornography in the United Kingdom, and said, would you lead corporate America to filter? It was a bit of a battle with Starbucks. Took us 6 years, but they're filtering now. All right? So you go in any of these restaurants and they're filtering. So we are we're actually approaching other businesses, hospitals, stadiums, airlines, you name it. Because have you noticed with your smartphone, you all have smartphones, right? You can check your email anywhere, just about, right? You can go on the internet anywhere. Why is that? Because you're hopping onto a Wi-Fi network. All right? So we want this next layer of access, if you will, once that device is outside of the home, to at least minimally be filtered and safe from illegal content. What we found is that a lot of like McDonald's, they said, hey, we're going to filter violence and drugs, and we're going to filter all this other stuff because we don't want that in our place of business. So, government, there's a good one, our taxpayer dollars. How many government buildings do you think are filtering this content that's not protected? I asked them, none of them know, in Washington. So I said, well, there's a good place to start. All right. So from all of this publicity with Starbucks and McDonald's, The students at Notre Dame male students wrote to the president, and 1,000 of them, and said, we want you to filter pornography on our campus. And guess what the president, a priest of Notre Dame, said? No. So we heard about that. We said, well, that's not okay. So, so we got behind them and we did a petition, and Notre Dame is still not filtering. All right, we're working with them. I went up and spoke with them this past year. But so many of the Christian colleges are. And guess who is filtering? CCU, yeah. All right, so this is one of our next big moves here, is to get all the schools to do this, because it just makes sense. Just as I don't know if I have that right here. No, I don't. But sexual assault on campuses is a big problem. Big problem. All right, and we do know, as you've learned earlier, that pornography can fuel sexual violence and sexual assault. It may not be the only thing, but it is a fueling factor, all right? So why not, as a university that's taking hardworking parents' money, filter content that we know is dangerous and can be harmful? So these are just a couple of stories of unintended consequences of how criminals and predators are using Wi-Fi. This has really helped us in our corporate efforts to say, hey, do you want a convicted felon coming into McDonald's and downloading child pornography or uploading traffic victims using your Wi-Fi and avoiding law enforcement detection? You go, I haven't thought about that yet. I said, well, it's happening. We see stories all the time. And here's just, I put a couple of them right up here. All right, next, this comes to government. A couple of years ago, we wrote the Children's Internet Safety Presidential Pledge, and Dr. Manning and I worked on this with our team at Enough is Enough, and I have to tell you, it's pretty darn good, all right? And it had 4 main points, and I've got them up here. And this was, we wrote it in such a way that it would be hard to say no if you're running for president, right? And we're gonna go, when we have a Democratic nominee, we're going to ask them to sign it too. I'm not going to mess with the big field right now, even though the field's narrowing down here as of last week. So, to aggressively enforce all the existing laws. How about that one? Right. Consider a presidential commission to study the public health aspects of this type of content of pornography. But with the existing laws, we're asking for aggressive enforcement of sex trafficking, child pornography, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're asking right now, I'm asking Congress to appropriate more money, because we need to be dealing with these issues of the sexual exploitation of our children like we're dealing with the drug war, like we're dealing with the opioid epidemic, like we're dealing with terrorism. Because this kind of, what is happening is destroying the lives of our kids. All right? There's some other things here that I'm not going to get into too much, but the Children's Internet Protection Act, you can ask me about schools and libraries when we get to questions if you want. Did you hear the story last year, I guess it was a year ago, 2 years ago, when we finally were able to shut down Backpage for selling ads of trafficked women and children on their websites? That was because of this piece of legislation, right? It was bipartisan. We're maybe 50 groups. We were one of them that got a law amended that was that these businesses, and Google and Facebook were the 2 big ones, by the way, that were fighting us on this, that were using a loophole in the law to say, we're not responsible for what people put on our sites, even if they're ads of trafficked girls and boys. And guess what? The courts agreed with them for all these years until we got FOSTA passed. Now, this Wednesday, there's a new piece of legislation introduced by Senator Blumenthal and Senator Graham, bipartisan. By the way, this is all bipartisan. The issue, this is what I love. I live in Washington. Everybody goes, oh, isn't it awful? Everybody's ripping each other apart. And I'm like, yeah, except our issue. Everybody cares about this. It is a nonpartisan issue, which is really refreshing in a way. But it's called the Earn It Act, all right? So this just dropped last week, and there's going to be a hearing on Wednesday. All right, so we rolled out from the presidential pledge, we rolled out a state attorneys general pledge, very similar to the president's pledge. We've got, I think, 15 attorneys general around the country that have signed on to this, Democrats and Republicans. I don't think we have Colorado yet, so if anybody has access to the Colorado AG, let us know. And also the governor's pledge. So we're rolling this out because we want to make, our goal is to make the safety of children in this digital world a top priority with our government leaders who, guess who they work for? Us, right. All right, the power of your vote. All right, this is Pope Francis, and we're working on this stuff worldwide. All right, so I'm going to come to what I think is the most important part here, and that is the role of the church. I got really frustrated. I get frustrated a lot. Really frustrated a number of years ago, right before 9/11. I said, God, it just seems like everything we do, all the laws we've gotten passed, all the things we try to get industry to do, all the, internet safety programs, it's still just so horrible. And as I was thinking and praying, and this is before 2 Chronicles 7:14 was really talked about a lot, I came across this. And if you know this verse, you can even say it with me. It says, if my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven and will forgive their sin and heal their land. Now listen to that. God is not saying if all the evildoers out there humble themselves and turn from their wicked ways. He says, if my people, he's talking about us. And as I thought about that, I was like, well, okay, we've got a lot of sexual brokenness inside the body of Christ, inside the church. We do. We've got people that are struggling. We've got people who have been sexually abused. I was, as a little girl. I was exposed to pornography when I was 7 years old. I was date raped when I was 22. I lost my virginity. I understand sexual brokenness. We've got a lot of this. And what I have seen and what I sincerely believe is that the church has done a really good job of welcoming broken people, except in the area of sexual brokenness, because it's so shame-based and it's hard stuff, right? And pastors and youth pastors are struggling, so where do they go? Do they go to their elders and maybe get kicked out of the church, And so I really believe that our churches, if we could be a safer place for people to come and get help and to get healing and to not be judged and to recognize that who is the battle really against? It's the enemy. The enemy has always used God's given gift of our sexuality to exploit it and to lead us astray, right? So I believe it begins with us. And so the good news is Jesus said that he came to set the captives free. And set at liberty those who are bruised. So I just want to encourage you that if you're struggling in this area or you know somebody who is, and it can look very different depending on what the brokenness is, that we have a lot of resources to help people. And my friend Dr. Manning is here. She's actually a counselor that deals with a lot of this and counsels a lot of women and men whose spouses have betrayed them in the area of some kind of sexual brokenness issues in their own life. So how do you get involved? Pray. First of all, it's a spiritual battle. I always say to parents, after you've used the technology and tried to lock it all down and talking to your kids and doing everything you're supposed to, pray for the Holy Spirit to give you discernment with your own children. Girls and the guys you're dating, this is an issue. When you look at the majority of girls and boys, by the time they're 14 or 15, have been exposed to this, and many of them are already hooked on it, these are something that I think that is really important to start to talk about and to work through. And so I just want to encourage everybody to do that. So protect your children. We've got the resources for you to do that. Guard yourself. Guard your heart and your mind. Set good boundaries. Have accountability and mentorship. This is Dr. Manning's website that I put up here. So just write it down. She's here. She'll give you a card. If you know somebody who needs help, go to our website. Everybody has the permission right now to take out their smartphone and go to enough.org and sign up for our newsletter, because we'll keep you up to date on what's happening. I can't even keep up, and I'm supposed to be an expert. Really, it's true. I used to could, but I can't anymore. We have petitions a lot of times, so you can get involved that way. If you know your governor or your state AG, share our pledge. Anybody that's got a business, remember, safe Wi-Fi. If you're on the board of a hospital, say, hey, are we filtering here? Well, let's filter. All right? This is not a hard thing to do. So I'm going to start to ask to take questions, because I need a drink of water. And you guys start asking questions. And then I'm going to introduce a partnering organization of ours who is here. All right. Who's going? Oh, thanks. Good. We got some questions. Do you have any questions?
Yeah, I've got some questions. I got a lot of questions, but I'll start with two. I love how this is a bipartisan issue, and I think that's so important. So my question's two-part in the notion that it's bipartisan. One is conservatives. We talk a lot about the sanctity of life. We talk about traditional family values. Talk about religious freedom. I don't see a lot of conservative leaders talking about the threat that pornography plays. So question one is, what does the conservative movement need to do to get more comfortable talking about this issue? Question number two is, what does the Me Too movement need to do to start taking on some of these issues too? Because I don't see it from the left side really as aggressively. I mean, the Me Too movement brought about the focus on sexual harassment, predators, and that type of thing. But with so much violence happening in pornography, why hasn't the Me Too movement stepped up on this? So both sides. What do conservatives need to do? What do
Thank you.
liberals need to do?
I think conservatives need to really understand, and I have actually just said this at the meeting that you and I were just at, of conservative leaders, thought leaders around the country, that I would like to see conservatives spend as much time and resources on protecting children and their dignity once they're born as they do for the preborn. This is a huge issue, right? So just because they get born doesn't mean they're safe. And in particular, some of the most vulnerable children are from broken families and the foster care system. Many of those foster care kids graduate out of foster care and end up on the streets and being trafficked. All right, but it's not just those at-risk kids, I would say. I've heard of so many stories of kids from Christian homes that have been trafficked. They've been in their high school, their boyfriend. These traffickers have groomers inside the schools that are young men and boys. And they'll build relationships with these girls and get them into, a lot of sex stuff, a lot of group stuff and everything else, and then end up drawing them away from their family, isolating them, and out on the streets. It's hard to believe, but there's such a manipulation that goes on in this grooming process. So I would say, spend the kind of time and effort to protect kids and to recognize that this is a big problem. I happen to think, because again, it goes back to the shame-based issue of sexual brokenness, that it's not something people are always comfortable with talking about, because so many people are personally struggling with it on some level, right? And when you see this inside the church, with something like 40 to 50% of pastors at one point were struggling themselves. We're not seeing a lot of this, and I'm not just talking about pornography, just any kind of sexual brokenness. So it can look like anything. It can be abortion. It can be, all this gender stuff that's going on, and same-sex attractions, it can look different. And I also believe that, or at least from what I've seen inside the church, they're oftentimes ill-equipped to counsel people. So it stays in the dark. And we know what stays in the dark, the enemy can just keep, it just gets worse and worse. Me Too movement. I think some of that is just ignorance. I just met with the editor of Vanity Fair, and I wanted to do a story about this because they're doing Me Too all the time, which, I can see Me Too. I said, but look, we've got to make the connection between the kind of content that is saturated the internet, but not just the internet, other avenues. We just did a petition against about Teen Vogue. Teen Vogue had a safe anal sex guide for 12, 13, and 14-year-old boys and girls. Yeah. And we got 50,000 petitions. And they were encouraging young boys and girls to try it. And it's still out there. And guess what they did on Christmas Day this year? I don't have my slide up here. When we did this big petition, the editor, who was an LBGD, okay, yeah, you know what I'm talking about, kissed his boyfriend and shot us the finger. But on Christmas Day, they didn't say Merry Christmas to their, tens of millions of teen readers. They ran a link to their safe anal sex guide. So the connection with Me Too just has not been made because I believe there's a lot of ignorance. But the good news is we have a lot of feminist groups involved in this effort now. And so that's good. We're all singing the same tune. All right. By the way, this is our resource center. Anything you need to know, we've got a whole clearinghouse of information. Okay, books, healing, etc., etc. And before we end, I want to introduce you guys to SaferNet because they've got a really cool technology. We don't normally endorse a technology, but they got a really kind of one-stop shop that I happen to love. Okay, next question. Yeah.
Wait for the microphone so people online can hear.
Yeah, like in the case of the president of Notre Dame, and when you go into these corporate offices and say, hey, will you filter? What's the biggest obstacle? What are they saying no to?
That's a good question. There is a lot of confusion about what is protected speech. That's why I start all these presentations with what is protected under the First Amendment and what is not. So sometimes it's just a matter of letting them know that a lot of the content that we're asking them to block and filter is not protected. The other is they consider themselves Ivy League, and they want their faculty and their students to have access to everything and to not have anything inadvertently blocked. And so what we try to tell them is that the technology is so good now that it doesn't overblock typically, but that faculty can have different access than students, and also they can unblock something if something is inadvertently blocked. So I don't know, Notre Dame, it's a little bit of a snobby thing, I think, actually, with them. The other colleges I have heard, even a seminary that I know the president of, have said it's a cost factor. But let me tell you how much it costs for Ohio Christian University, because we're working with them. They're filtering. For their entire university, which is much bigger than this one, it costs them an extra $15,000 a year to filter. That's it. It's inexpensive. And these companies that provide Wi-Fi, now remember, any place you go that has Wi-Fi, you've got a Wi-Fi provider. The biggest, I believe they're the biggest, I'm pretty sure they are, is Cisco. Cisco has all the filters. All they have to do is call Cisco and say, I want a filter. They will upcharge it, but they can filter whatever they want. They can filter hate speech, they can filter terrorist activity, they can filter racist speech, they can filter porn, child porn, lingerie, whatever. There, down this whole list of 2 or 3 dozen category contents, and they just flip them on, and it's done. So there's an ignorance factor. And when I talked to McDonald's, the head of McDonald's a few years ago, they said, we hadn't really thought about it. So there's that other part of that issue is that they don't know what they don't know. So a lot of businesses will just decide to offer Wi-Fi. Why? Because they want you in their store. They want you in their restaurant. They want you in the lobby of their hotel, right? Using internet. So they're like, wow, this is a great added value benefit. And it is, except you get all the good and all the bad.
So does this new, well, Facebook came out and said that there's going to start filtering pictures. Is that a benefit? Is that feeding, helping us here? Or
Are you talking about encryption?
No, they said Facebook was going to start, there was going to be a delay when you upload your pictures because they were going to start scanning them. And it was...
That may have been, I'm not sure exactly what you're talking about, but that might have been the issue of scanning, was it scanning for child pornography images?
Well, that was what it alluded to.
Yeah. Facebook's talked about a lot of things. They get kind of a bad rap. I mean, I've got a lot of issues with Facebook, but they also are doing more than a lot of the social media platforms. They get reported for more abuses of child pornography and pornography because they actually report it. Some of the other platforms don't even report it. So and even Apple doesn't report it. So if you say, oh, there's nothing happening on that platform, it doesn't mean that there's nothing happening. It's that there's no reporting going on. So you kind of have to know how to read that. But I will tell you one of the biggest concerns right now of the Department of Justice, there was a whole summit on it, is what they call end-to-end encryption. And now what Facebook and all of them are talking about doing is on Messenger is encrypting all of that data from the sender to the end user. Now, this would be a disaster because it would be warrant proof. So in other words, if there's child pornography going through that message, if there's terrorist activity, right? If there's anything, law enforcement could not get at that information even with a warrant. So I just talked to Congresswoman, I was just in 2 offices a couple weeks ago. I think it was Wagner's office. Yeah, it was Congresswoman Wagner's office who helped us with FOSTA in the House to try to write some legislation. And I said, I don't know how you're going to write legislation because these are independent businesses. So my suspicion of what the next wave of regulation might look like is that it's gotten so out of hand. Google and Facebook, their audiences are bigger than most nations. They are, okay? It's scary. And they're controlling a lot, including our lives. And what's going on, trust me, they know just about everything about you. And they, well, yes, hi, guys. I know, I'm talking about you right now. So they hear and they listen, they know our information. And so I believe that the next wave, is, if you will, is going to be kind of like what happened with monopolies. When all of a sudden the government realized, oh geez, some of these big companies have monopolies. So they had to come up with new laws to govern against and regulate against monopolies so that we could still have free enterprise. And I think we've gotten to that point now where the government's just kind of scratching their head and said, we've got to figure out how to deal with some of this stuff that's going on with these companies that are bigger than us. All right.
Can you comment on, Can you please comment on the any attempts that are being made to regulate carriers, AT&T, Verizon, and so on, and pushing traffic there?
Well, I will tell you that the good news with carriers, now you're talking about phone carriers. So here's the good news. The phone carriers are used to regulation, right? Because there were dial-a-porn laws way back when we were dialing. remember that? And they were used to being regulating and having some kind of government oversight over what they were doing. So what I have found in my experience is that these businesses that are the carriers, the now wireless carriers, are much less problematic with regulation than the companies that were birthed as a result of the internet, which would be the social media platforms and the Googles and of the world. Okay, now everything is merging with media. So Verizon and AT&T, they are content owners now. So there's a lot of talk about, I mean, for instance, movies are rated, right? You've got PG, R, X, whatever. But yeah, sitting right next to it on a streaming platform, you can have Pornhub with live rape going on of a trafficked child. So how are we going to deal with that? Now, that's what I believe is, again, going to be this next round. If we cannot let law enforcement let the internet be treated any differently than any other medium. Okay, they can't get a free pass because they've gotten a free pass. And I don't think it's because they necessarily wanted to give them a free pass. It's just that the technology took off so fast and the bad guys just were so far out, you know, and once they get out in front of all this stuff, it's hard to catch up. So we're hoping with, I was just texting one of my friends who's right under bar at the Department of Justice yesterday, to get a meeting with him in the next couple of weeks to try to get these obscenity laws enforced. And if you want to pray about something that could really shift the dynamic here, pray that we get that meeting and that this Attorney General will start prosecuting the obscenity laws. That would be a huge win. Because the pornographers know exactly what they're doing is illegal. They know it. And they care about the money. Remember, it's all about money with them. So if they believe that they're going to get prosecuted and shut down everything, you know, they're going to listen. Okay, what else do we have?
I'm very glad I brought my family up in the late 60s and early 70s before this high tech came in. I don't know if it's working. Somebody has to be accountable
Yes.
for these children's situations. How much, in your experience, do you put that at the door of parents or single parent families? How much blame do you put at their door?
I think it's hard to put blame. I believe that parents are the first line of defense for sure. But parents, now let me just back up. This generation of young parents are better at being cyber parents than the generation before them, because the generation before them didn't grow up with the technology like me. Okay, it came into being when we were like in our 30s, right? But this new generation of parents, like my stepchildren, they're in their 30s and early 40s. They all grew up with technology. For them, I think that there really is no excuse. They know what's out there. And here's this is a thing that still really just baffles me, is that Christian parents and grandparents are often the worst. Why? Because they think that my kid is a good kid. My kid loves Jesus. My kid's in youth group. My kid is smart. And I keep saying it's not about your kid. Who comes to kill, steal, and destroy? Right? The bad guys are using this technology, whether and it's pornography or the predators or whatever, and they are going after your kids. And if you are not vigilant, I mean 24/7 on top of it, they can get through. The smartest, brightest kid that loves God the most can get hooked. And I always say, you know, don't shame anybody. I've seen men that love the Lord and they get hooked on this stuff because it started when they were young. Girls who love the Lord and they get hooked, you know, or their boyfriend introduces them or whatever, you know. Nobody is immune. So I would say that first of all. And it's very hard as a parent to keep on top of it all. and SaferNet, they're outside. I hope you will go meet with them. I really love this technology. I just met Wendy Stand Up, and Jeff, her boss who created this technology, wherever he is, Jeff, his kid, Patrick, I'm sorry, has a whole bunch of kids. And I will tell you, there aren't a lot. I always, first of all, this is my mantra when people ask me what to use. To go to the technology, the parental control tools on with your wireless carrier or your Apple or whatever, and start there with filtering, monitoring, But then it's hard because then you got to do that with Xbox, and you got to do that with every other technology. They have created this new technology, SaferNet, that works with all of this, I think, except for maybe gaming, and you're working on that next. It's coming. But the cool thing too that I haven't seen yet is once you get this set up on every device that your kids are using, you can actually you can allow certain apps and not other apps. You can allow certain platforms like Facebook or something and not other platforms, whereas most of the technologies there, you just have to shut off all social media altogether. You can't pick and choose. The other thing that I thought was really unique about SaferNet is that once you get it set up correctly, that child can take that device anywhere, and they can't get on a virtual private network and onto a Wi-Fi network and circumvent the controls. So that I think is really cool. And they're based here in Denver. Hello. So, meet with them. Okay, any other questions?
Maybe one more question? Go ahead.
Hi, thanks for talking about this difficult subject. We know that men and the demand for this is what's fueling a lot of this. And last year, a lot of people really went down. I mean, Jared from Subway is one that got in trouble. The other one is Jeffrey Epstein.
Mm-hmm.
And when he was killed or hung himself or whatever, we know that he had vast networks and tons and tons of people. So are you involved in that as well? As like, hey, do you know, are in the know of how do these criminals get in trouble and go to jail and, get punished for this? Because this is really, really disgusting.
Well, let me just say that that kind of sexual behavior knows no bounds. I always say you can't detect a disguised predator. That's another little mantra I want you to remember. They can be a wealthy football owner. Hello, Patriots. They can be, multi-billionaires like Jeffrey Epstein and hanging out with presidents and princes. They can be the sleazy guy hanging, but they're oftentimes exactly who you don't think they would be. Because this is a secret thing that is done and often, in the shadows. And I do believe there's an old boys club. They protect each other. A lot of it started, I believe, back in the Playboy era, where it kind of started there, and it's just continued to go on. And remember, all this sexual content and acting out is also it escalates. So I believe Jeffrey Epstein is the perfect example of someone who actually appealed to the rich and famous to provide trafficked girls, even though many of them were there because they could have left, some of them. I mean, they weren't necessarily shackled or anything, but and maybe some of them, were coerced, I believe, as I've heard. But, girls can sometimes get into this too because of the high life, and they get sort of sucked in that way. But we do know that there a lot of these girls were definitely trafficked and coerced, didn't quite know what they were getting into, and then before they knew it, they were in, and they were in deep. So, yeah. I mean, I know a lot of people who knew him, actually. And I asked them, why didn't you say anything? They didn't. Yeah.
Speaking of visibility, did you talk to the Pope about this?
I did, yes. I'll go back to that slide. 2 years ago, there was a group of leaders, about 120 delegates, I was one of them, that met for a week in Rome. And we looked at all these issues that we've talked about tonight, and we came up with a global action plan. And these were people that are legislators in parliaments worldwide. They're law enforcement people. They're corporate people. They're people like Jill, in the therapy world. They're in my world, in the prevention world, etc. And we developed a global action plan, and I think it is the best I've seen. And we're adding to it. It's an evolving document, and you can just go to I don't know what the web. I think it's just you can Google World Congress on Child Dignity and see that. And one of the things I actually got in that global call was that all Catholic churches, institutions, and schools worldwide would adopt a safe Wi-Fi policy. And I sent it to the president of Notre Dame. He still said no. So, I talked to the Archbishop about it in Washington, and I'm going to see if I can't get a stronger letter from somebody more important than me. But anyhow, Pope Francis, actually, when I did talk to him briefly, when I shook his hand there, I didn't talk to him about that because he had already signed this. But what I did say to him, I could just tell he was exhausted. He was shook like probably 200 hands before he got to my hand. And I just went up to him and I said, everybody was always chatting him up, right? Like, bless me, Father, can I kiss your ring and all. And I just said, I just want you to know I'm praying for you, for strength and encouragement and wisdom. And he just lit up like a Christmas tree and started shaking my hand and said, thank you so much. And we started talking. And everybody's like, oh, wow, they made a connection. I went, no, I just actually offered to pray for him. How about them apples? So many of these people that are in leadership, people are coming to them for something and not asking them what they need. And so that was my big conversation with Pope. All right. Anybody else?
Well, on that note, let's close in prayer for Donna Rice Hughes, who's doing all this great work. Can we pray for you real quick?
Oh, sure. Absolutely. And Jill here too. Just come stand up with me. She's out on the front lines, and you wouldn't believe the stuff she has to deal with.
Come on up
My
here,
dear
we're gonna pray
friend
for you, too.
and colleague who's on our board. Yes.
Lord, I am so very grateful for these strong, courageous women that are speaking your truth into our communities. Father, thank you that they are willing to take on these challenging topics that many of us look away. We sweep it under the rug and we pretend it doesn't exist, but they walk right into the lion's den. Father, I pray for tremendous success upon their work. I pray, Father, that tonight you give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and an open heart to go out there and make a difference in our community as a result of what we heard.